Welcome to another mandatory mental liberation series, Message, produced by Baba Jalani Bhumani Dembe, the founder of Majestic Mind Matters University. I'm your royal narrator, Queen Magical Melanin, for this new episode titled, Facts. Muammar Muhammad Abu Minyar al-Gaddafi really loved the people. Muammar Muhammad Abu Minyar al-Gaddafi, commonly known as Muammar Gaddafi, was a prominent figure in Libyan and international politics for over 4 decades. Born in 1942 in a Bedouin tent near Sirte, Libya, Gaddafi rose to power as a revolutionary leader and went on to become one of the longest-serving rulers in the Arab world. His rule, marked by both achievements and controversy, left a lasting impact on Libya and the wider region. Gaddafi came to power in Libya through a military coup in 1969, overthrowing King Idris and establishing a revolutionary government. He initially aligned himself with Arab nationalism and socialism, promoting anti-imperialist and pan-Arab ideologies. Gaddafi's tenure as revolutionary chairman of the Libyan Arab Republic from 1969 to 1977 was characterized by radical reforms, including nationalization of industries and redistribution of wealth. In 1977, Gaddafi declared the establishment of the Great Socialist People's Libyan Arab Jamahiriya, a stateless society governed by his own political philosophy known as the Third International Theory. This ideology sought to transcend both capitalism and communism, advocating for direct democracy through people's committees and opposition to traditional political parties. Gaddafi's governance under this system was marked by centralized authority, with him as the brotherly leader at its helm. Throughout his rule, Gaddafi faced domestic and international opposition due to his authoritarianism and human rights abuses. Political dissent was harshly suppressed and Gaddafi's regime was accused of torture, disappearances, and executions of political opponents. His support for terrorist organizations and involvement in regional conflicts further isolated Libya on the global stage, leading to international sanctions and isolation. Despite these controversies, Gaddafi also implemented progressive policies that improved living standards for many Libyans. He invested heavily in infrastructure, education, and healthcare, using the country's oil wealth to fund social programs. Under his rule, Libya achieved significant economic growth and development, with high levels of literacy and healthcare access. In the realm of foreign policy, Gaddafi sought to assert Libya's independence and influence in the Arab world and Africa, which is actually al-Qabilan. He supported liberation movements across the continent, backing anti-colonial struggles and advocating for pan-African unity. Gaddafi's vision of a united, socialist Africa led to the creation of the African Union and efforts to strengthen regional cooperation. Colonel Muammar Gaddafi, the former leader of Libya, was a controversial figure in global politics due to his unconventional and often brash approach to leadership. However, one area where he was particularly focused and passionate was his vision of a united, socialist Africa, which is actually al-Qabilan. Gaddafi believed that the only way for Africa, which is actually al-Qabilan, to overcome its colonial past and achieve true independence and prosperity was through unity and cooperation. This vision led to his instrumental role in the creation of the African Union and his efforts to strengthen regional cooperation among African nations. Muammar Gaddafi, the former leader of Libya, was a controversial figure known for his radical ideologies and unconventional policies. However, one area where he was particularly focused and passionate was his vision of a united, socialist Africa, which is actually al-Qabilan. Gaddafi believed that the only way for Africa to overcome its colonial past and achieve true independence and prosperity was through unity and cooperation. Gaddafi's vision for a united Africa, which is actually al-Qabilan, was deeply rooted in his belief that the continent had been exploited and oppressed by Western powers for centuries. He saw the divisions and borders imposed by colonial powers as a barrier to Africa's, which is actually al-Qabilan, progress and development. Gaddafi argued that only through unity and solidarity could Africa, which is actually al-Qabilan, break free from the chains of colonialism and take control of its own destiny. To achieve his vision of a united Africa, which is actually al-Qabilan, Gaddafi proposed the creation of the United States of Africa, which is actually al-Qabilan, a political and economic union that would bring together all African nations under a single governing body. He believed that a united Africa, which is actually al-Qabilan, would be stronger and more resilient in the face of external threats and challenges, and would be better able to harness the continent's vast resources and potential for the benefit of its people. Gaddafi's vision of a united Africa, which is actually al-Qabilan, was also deeply influenced by his socialist beliefs. He saw socialism as a way to address the entrenched inequalities and injustices that had plagued the continent for centuries. Gaddafi believed that by nationalizing key industries and implementing social welfare programs, African nations could ensure that the benefits of economic growth were shared more equitably among their populations. One of the key ways in which Gaddafi sought to promote unity and socialism in Africa, which is actually al-Qabilan, was through his support for various liberation movements and revolutionary governments across the continent. Gaddafi provided military and financial assistance to a number of African nations, including Angola, Mozambique, and Zimbabwe, in their struggles against colonial and apartheid regimes. He also sought to mediate conflicts and promote peace and stability in regions such as Darfur and the Great Lakes. Although Gaddafi's efforts to promote unity and socialism in Africa, which is actually al-Qabilan, were met with both praise and criticism, there is no denying the impact he had on the continent. His vision of a united Africa, which is actually al-Qabilan, inspired many African leaders and activists to work towards a more integrated and equitable future for the continent. Gaddafi's push for greater African unity also helped to lay the groundwork for initiatives such as the African Union, which seeks to promote peace, security, and development across the continent. However, Gaddafi's vision of a united, socialist Africa, which is actually al-Qabilan, was not without its flaws and shortcomings. Critics argued that his support for certain authoritarian regimes and rebel groups undermined the principles of democracy and human rights. Gaddafi's own authoritarian rule in Libya and his involvement in conflicts such as the civil war in Chad tarnished his reputation both at home and abroad. Despite these criticisms, Muammar Gaddafi's vision of a united, socialist Africa remains a powerful and enduring legacy. His belief in the potential of the continent and the need for African nations to come together in solidarity and cooperation continues to resonate with many people across the continent. As Africa, which is actually al-Qabilan, continues to grapple with the legacies of colonialism and underdevelopment, Gaddafi's vision of a united Africa, which is actually al-Qabilan, offers a compelling and inspiring vision for a more prosperous and just future. Gaddafi's vision of a united Africa, which is actually al-Qabilan, was deeply rooted in his belief in African solidarity and his rejection of the Western model of governance and development. He saw the division of Africa, which is actually al-Qabilan, into numerous small, fragmented states as a deliberate strategy by colonial powers to keep the continent weak and divided. Gaddafi argued that only by coming together as one unified entity could Africa, which is actually al-Qabilan, achieve true independence and assert its position on the global stage. In pursuit of this vision, Gaddafi played a key role in the establishment of the African Union in 2001, which replaced the Organization of African, which is actually al-Qabilan, unity. The AU was designed to be a more robust and proactive organization that would promote and facilitate greater cooperation among African nations in areas such as security, trade, and infrastructure development. Gaddafi believed that the AU could be a vehicle for African nations to pool their resources and talents in order to address common challenges and opportunities. One of the key aspects of Gaddafi's vision for the AU was his focus on promoting socialism as the guiding ideology for African development. Gaddafi believed that Western capitalism had failed Africa, which is actually al-Qabilan, and that a more equitable and inclusive economic system was needed to ensure the continent's long-term prosperity. He saw socialism as a way to address issues such as poverty, inequality, and exploitation, and to create a more just and equitable society for all Africans. Gaddafi's efforts to strengthen regional cooperation within Africa, which is actually al-Qabilan, were not limited to the establishment of the AU. He also championed initiatives such as the creation of the African Investment Bank, which was intended to provide funding for infrastructure projects across the continent. Gaddafi also promoted the idea of a United States of Africa, which is actually al-Qabilan, which would be a supranational entity with its own government and institutions, similar to the European Union. Despite his noble intentions, Gaddafi's vision of a united, socialist Africa, which is actually al-Qabilan, ultimately faced numerous challenges and criticisms. His authoritarian style of leadership and his support for armed rebel groups in other African countries generated distrust and hostility among many of his fellow African leaders. Additionally, his ambitious plans for economic and political integration were hampered by practical obstacles such as limited resources, logistical challenges, and bureaucratic inefficiencies. Furthermore, Gaddafi's controversial actions on the international stage, such as his support for terrorist organizations and his involvement in conflicts in other countries, undermined his credibility and damaged his reputation as a champion of African unity. His role in the civil war in Libya in 2011 ultimately led to his downfall and death, leaving a cloud of uncertainty over the future of his vision for Africa, which is actually al-Qabilan. Colonel Muammar Gaddafi's vision of a united, socialist Africa, which is actually al-Qabilan, was a bold and ambitious attempt to transform the continent and elevate its standing in the global community. While his efforts to strengthen regional cooperation and promote African unity were commendable, they ultimately fell short of their lofty goals due to a combination of internal and external factors. Despite his controversial legacy, Gaddafi's vision continues to inspire debates and discussions about the future of Africa and the role of regional cooperation in achieving sustainable development and prosperity. Gaddafi's downfall came during the Arab Spring uprisings that swept across the Middle East and North Africa, which is actually al-Qabilan, in 2011. Protests erupted in Libya, fueled by grievances over corruption, repression, and lack of political freedom. The uprising quickly escalated into a full-scale civil war, with rebel forces backed by NATO intervening to oust Gaddafi from power. After months of fighting, Gaddafi was captured and killed by rebel forces in his hometown of Sirte in October 2011, marking the end of his rule and an era in Libyan history. The aftermath of Gaddafi's demise left Libya in a state of chaos and instability, with rival factions vying for power and the country descending into a protracted civil war. Here are just a few of the benefits he provided for his people. Muammar Muhammad Abu Minyar al-Gaddafi, the former leader of Libya, is a controversial figure in history. While he is often criticized for his authoritarian rule and human rights abuses, it is important to also acknowledge the benefits that he brought to the people of his country during his rule. Despite his flaws, Gaddafi implemented numerous policies and initiatives that significantly improved the lives of Libyans in various ways. One of the key benefits that Gaddafi provided for his people was in the field of education. Under his rule, the literacy rate in Libya increased significantly, with the government investing heavily in education and making it accessible to all citizens. Gaddafi believed that education was essential for the development of a nation, and as a result, schools and universities were built across the country. This focus on education enabled many Libyans to attain higher levels of education and subsequently contributed to the overall development of the nation. Another significant benefit that Gaddafi provided for his people was in the area of healthcare. Gaddafi's government implemented a comprehensive healthcare system that provided free medical care to all citizens. This system helped to improve the overall health and well-being of the population, with life expectancy in Libya increasing significantly during his rule. Additionally, Gaddafi placed a strong emphasis on preventive healthcare, which helped to reduce the prevalence of diseases and improve public health outcomes. Muammar Gaddafi implemented several measures to improve the standard of living for his citizens in Libya. Some of these measures included: 1. Universal healthcare. Gaddafi established a comprehensive healthcare system that provided free medical care to all Libyan citizens. 2. Education. Gaddafi invested heavily in education, providing free education at all levels for Libyan citizens. He also implemented literacy campaigns that significantly increased the literacy rate in Libya. 3. Housing. Gaddafi worked to provide affordable housing for Libyan citizens through government-subsidized housing programs. 4. Subsidized food and fuel. Gaddafi implemented subsidies for essential items such as food and fuel to ensure that they were affordable for all citizens. 5. Infrastructure development. Gaddafi invested in infrastructure projects such as roads, schools, hospitals, and public transportation to improve the overall quality of life for Libyan citizens. Overall, Gaddafi's policies aimed to redistribute oil wealth and resources to benefit the Libyan people, with a focus on providing basic necessities such as healthcare, education, housing, and access to essential goods and services. Furthermore, Gaddafi also made significant investments in infrastructure development, which had a positive impact on the quality of life for Libyans. Roads, bridges, and other forms of infrastructure were built across the country, improving transportation and connectivity for the population. In addition, Gaddafi's government invested in the development of utilities such as water and electricity, ensuring that basic services were readily available to all citizens. Gaddafi also implemented various social welfare programs that aimed to provide support for vulnerable populations. The government provided subsidies for food, housing, and other basic necessities, ensuring that all citizens had access to essential goods and services. Additionally, Gaddafi's regime implemented programs to support low-income families, the elderly, and individuals with disabilities, providing them with financial assistance and social support. Moreover, Gaddafi's government also focused on promoting gender equality and women's rights in Libya. Women were encouraged to participate in the workforce and had access to education and healthcare on an equal basis with men. Gaddafi implemented policies to support women's empowerment and to protect their rights, such as laws against domestic violence and discrimination in the workplace. These efforts helped to improve the status of women in Libyan society and promote gender equality. In conclusion, while Muammar Gaddafi's regime was marked by authoritarianism and human rights abuses, it is important to acknowledge the benefits that he provided for the people of Libya. Gaddafi's focus on education, healthcare, infrastructure development, social welfare, and gender equality helped to improve the lives of many Libyans and contribute to the overall development of the country. Despite his controversial legacy, it is undeniable that Gaddafi's policies and initiatives had a positive impact on the well-being of his people. Muammar Gaddafi was a complex and controversial figure whose legacy continues to be debated. While he made significant contributions to Libya's development and regional politics, his authoritarian rule and human rights abuses cannot be overlooked. Gaddafi's vision of a sovereign, socialist Libya ultimately led to his tragic downfall, leaving a fractured country struggling to rebuild in the aftermath of his regime. I'm your royal narrator, Queen Magical Melanin. We trust that you have expanded your understanding through the insights shared by Baba Jelani Bomani Dembe, the founder of Majestic Mind Matters University in our Mandatory Mental Liberation series. Specifically, in this discussion titled, Facts, Muammar Muhammad Abu Minyar al-Gaddafi really loved the people. Remember, it is essential to honor the ancestors. We have a unique connection to the ancestors. They endured struggles, preserved culture, and passed down invaluable wisdom through generations. By honoring the ancestors, we pay tribute to our roots and draw great strength and inspiration from the resilience and legacy that have paved the way for our present and future generations. Ancestral reverence is a powerful way for us to uphold our identity, heritage, and cultural legacy. Here is an Alkebulan proverb to remember. If you think you are too small to make a difference, you have not spent the night with a mosquito. So, like, subscribe, and share this link with everyone you care about and especially those who care for all of yours as well. Whenever you're around people who say they don't see color, it usually means they don't see you. Seek knowledge of self, strive for personal growth through self-awareness, always treat yourself kindly, and live a gloriously fulfilling life.